The summons. The crystalline spires of Varanther Station pierced the violet nebula like frozen lightning. For 3,000 cycles the galactic sovereignty had convened here, a parliament of 8 apex species who carved up reality itself with treaties and trade agreements. Today they would meet the ninth. Ambassador Kaelin Voss stepped through the airlock, her boots clicking against floors that had never known human footfall. Behind her, the science officer Marcus Chen carried a single data tablet. That was all Earth had sent, 2 diplomats and 1 device. No fleet, no weapons, no leverage. Inadequate, hissed Thexyler, the Sethian delegate, her serpentine body coiling around her obsidian seat. The council summons them and they send 2? Chancellor Orivex of the Carry Dominion raised 4 of his 6 arms in dismissal. His carapace gleamed like polished copper under the chamber's harsh light. What did you expect? They've been spacefaring for barely a century. We were conquering star systems when their ancestors lived in caves. The other delegates laughed, a symphony of clicks, warbles and subsonic rumbles that made Kaelin's teeth ache. She'd studied their files during the 6-month journey. The Carry, master economists who'd financialized entire sectors. The Sethians, biological engineers who grew their ships from living matter. The VRYNN, quantum mathematicians who navigated dimensions humans could barely conceptualize. And then there was High Arbiter Zelix of the Corvan Empire, whose species had ruled this council for 800 years. His crystalline form refracted light into cruel rainbows, and his voice resonated through the chamber like a judge pronouncing sentence. Humans of Earth, Zelix intoned. You stand before the galactic sovereignty not as equals, but as supplicants. Your expansion into the outer rim has been noted. You have established 14 colonies on worlds we designated as unclaimed. This was your error. Marcus whispered to Kaelin. Here it comes. Those worlds, Zelix continued, fall within the resource allocation zones established by the Treaty of Endless Concordance, signed millennia before your species learned to make fire. You will abandon these colonies. You will pay reparations. You will accept a treaty limiting your expansion to your home system for the next 500 years. These terms are not negotiable. Silence fell. 8 species watched the humans with expressions ranging from boredom to predatory anticipation. This was how it always went. New species reached for the stars, found them already owned, and learned their place. Kaelin stepped forward. May I speak? Thexyler's laugh was like steam escaping from a vent. The primitive asks permission to make noises. How quaint. You may, Zelix said, waving a crystalline appendage. We allow last words before compliance. Kaelin's heart hammered, but her voice stayed level. Before I respond to your demands, I'd like to understand something. The Treaty of Endless Concordance, who signed it? Orivex's antennae twitched with irritation. The founding species of this council, obviously. The Corvan, Carry, Sethian, VRYNN, Delthari, Morvex, Tithian, and Phalarii. The 8 pillars of galactic civilization. No other species? No species worthy of consideration existed when the treaty was drafted. Kaelin nodded slowly. And the 3,000 species who've joined the galactic community since then? Did any of them sign this treaty? They accepted its terms, Zelix said, his tone sharpening like a blade. As you will. But they didn't sign it, Kaelin pressed. They were simply told it applied to them. Told that decisions made before their ancestors evolved would govern their future forever. She looked around the chamber. How many species have you done this to? How many were given the same choice you're offering us? Submit or be destroyed? The VRYNN delegate, a being of shifting geometric patterns named Axiomera, spoke for the first time. Her voice was mathematically precise. The alternative is chaos. Without the treaty structure, species war over resources. Millions die. The treaty prevents this. By ensuring only 8 species make the decisions, Marcus said, speaking up. 8 species control everything. Everyone else gets table scraps. Thexyler's crest flared crimson. You dare. We dare to ask questions, Kaelin interrupted. We dare to notice that your galactic sovereignty is 8 predators who divided the prey before anyone else arrived. You're not peacekeepers. You're a cartel. The chamber erupted. Delegates shouted in 17 languages, security drones hummed to life, and Zelix's crystalline form blazed with barely contained fury. Enough. The High Arbiter's voice shattered 3 viewing screens. You have insulted this council with your ignorance and arrogance. You will accept our terms, or we will make an example of Earth that will echo through this galaxy for 10,000 years. Kaelin reached into her jacket. Every weapon system in the chamber locked onto her. She slowly withdrew a small hollow emitter and placed it on the floor. "Before you do," she said quietly, "you might want to see what we found." The emitter activated, and the air above it filled with data. Trade routes, financial records, communication intercepts, 3,000 years of deals, threats, and manipulations, the complete hidden history of the galactic sovereignty. Zelix's light dimmed. "Where did you?" "Humans are very good at one thing," Kalen said, meeting his gaze. "We're good at finding out what we're not supposed to know." "The evidence." The hollow display rotated slowly, casting dancing shadows across the faces of 8 species who'd thought their secrets buried under millennia of careful management. Kalen watched their expressions shift, shock, fury, but most tellingly, fear. "This is fabricated," Orivex declared, though his mandibles clicked nervously. "Human propaganda to avoid accepting their rightful place." "Is it?" Marcus stepped forward, expanding a section of the data. "This is a communication from Carrie Dominion Economic Minister Thavrix to the Corvin Trade Consul, dated 743 cycles ago. I'll read the relevant section. The Delthari are becoming problematic. They're developing faster-than-light communication that doesn't require our relay stations. Recommend economic sanctions to force compliance, followed by strategic resource denial if they persist." A new delegate spoke, Myra T., representative of the Delthari Union. Her bioluminescent patterns flickered with barely suppressed anger. "You sanctioned us? We lost 11 colony worlds during that famine. You told us it was a natural resource collapse." "It was necessary," Zelix said coldly. "You were undermining galactic stability." "We were undermining your monopoly," Myra T. shot back. "There's a difference." Kalen expanded another data cluster. The Morvex plague of cycle 2847. The official record says it was a tragic accident, a natural pathogen that killed 4 billion Morvex before the cure was found. But according to these Sethian genetic engineering logs, it was deliberately created and released because the Morvex were developing planetary shield technology that would have made them impossible to coerce. Thexiler's body went rigid. "Those files are classified." "How did you?" "We're human," Kalen said simply. "We've spent our entire history being told we couldn't do things. We got good at doing them anyway." The chamber descended into chaos. Delegates who'd sat quietly for centuries suddenly found their voices. The Philarii ambassador, a jellyfish-like being named Synthex, projected accusations at the VRNN. The Tithian delegate demanded answers from the Corvin. Alliances that had seemed eternal began fracturing in real time. Zelix's form blazed brighter, attempting to restore order. "This changes nothing. The treaty stands. The structure holds." "Does it?" Marcus pulled up a new file. "Because according to your own internal projections, the system is already collapsing. You've been suppressing 317 species who are technologically ready to join the Council. You've been manipulating 68 more into conflicts with each other to prevent alliances. And you've been doing it all because if you let the galaxy function fairly, you 8 would become just 8 more voices among thousands. You're not peacekeepers," Kalen continued. "You're terrified emperors pretending to be public servants. And you've been getting away with it because no one had the full picture. Until now." Axiomara's geometric form shifted into a defensive configuration. "Even if this data is authentic, revealing it proves nothing except that governance is complex. We made difficult decisions for the greater good." "The greater good?" Marathi's light patterns turned blood red. "You let billions of my people die to protect your comm relay profits. We stabilized the sector. You murdered us." Kalen let the argument rage for a moment before speaking again, her voice cutting through the noise. "Here's what's going to happen. We're broadcasting this data to every species in the galaxy. Right now. This isn't a negotiation or a threat, it's already done. By the time we leave this station, 7 trillion beings will know exactly what the galactic sovereignty really is." Zelix's light flickered, the first sign of genuine uncertainty Kalen had seen from him. "You'll destroy everything. Chaos will consume the galaxy." "Maybe," Kalen admitted. "Or maybe species will finally be free to build something better than your rigged game. Either way, it's not your choice anymore." Orivex slammed his primary fist against his podium. "You've doomed yourselves? You think revealing this protects you? We'll crush Earth into dust." "Will you?" Marcus activated another display. "This is a real-time feed of human colony transmissions. All 14 colonies. All broadcasting this data. Along with 342 other species who we contacted before we came here, species you've been suppressing, threatening, or manipulating. They're all releasing their own evidence simultaneously. Kalen smiled. You wanted to make an example of us? Go ahead. Try. But you'll have to make examples of 400 species at once, and the entire galaxy will be watching. They'll see exactly what happens to people who tell the truth about you. For the first time in 800 years of Corvin dominance, Zelix had no response. The High Arbiter's crystalline form dimmed as he calculated the impossible mathematics of the situation. Attacking Earth would confirm everything. Doing nothing would show weakness. Every option led to the same conclusion. The old order was over. Thexyler hissed, "What do you want?" "What?" Kalen's expression hardened. "We want you to try something you haven't done in 3,000 years. We want you to govern honestly. Real representation. Fair treaties. Open markets. And if you can't do that..." She gestured at the swirling data. "Well, you've seen what happens when humans decide to fix something ourselves." The chamber fell silent. The 8 pillars of galactic civilization faced the reality that their foundation had just crumbled. And humanity, the newest species at the table, had barely begun to speak. The fracture. The next 7 cycles transformed the galactic sovereignty into something unrecognizable. The holofeeds that once broadcast carefully curated council sessions now showed screaming matches and walkouts. Thexyler had stormed out twice. Myra T had demanded Sethian reparations for the Delthari famine. 36 species had filed formal challenges to the Treaty of Endless Concordance. And through it all, Kalen and Marcus sat quietly in the observer's gallery, watching their bomb detonate in slow motion. "You've destroyed galactic civilization," said Executor Rinval, the Tithian ambassador, finding Kalen in the station's meditation gardens 3 days after the revelation. His crystalline exoskeleton refracted the nebula's light into fractals. Unlike Zelix's aggressive brilliance, Rinval's glow was subdued, almost mournful. 5,000 years of peace, gone because 2 humans couldn't accept their place. Kalen looked up from the bioluminescent pond. Was it peace? Or was it just the silence of the suppressed? Semantics. Rinval settled onto a nearby meditation platform, his weight causing it to hum in harmonic resonance. Before the Treaty of Endless Concordance, species warred constantly. The Sethian VRYNN conflict alone consumed 40 star systems. The Carry economic collapse of Cycle 1247 killed trillions. The treaty ended that. By putting 8 species in charge of everyone else. By creating structure, Rinval corrected. Order from chaos. Yes, the founding species maintained control, but they also prevented the kind of catastrophic conflicts that nearly sterilized this galaxy. That's worth something. Kalen studied him. Of the 8 council members, Rinval had been the only one who hadn't immediately threatened humanity. His voting record, buried in Marcus's data, showed occasional dissent from the majority, small resistances that never quite crossed into rebellion. "You didn't know," she said suddenly, "about the Morvex plague, the Delthari sanctions. You weren't part of the inner circle." Rinval's light dimmed. "The Tithians have been council members for 2,000 years. But we were never founders. We were invited to join after the structure was established. We thought it was an honor." His laugh was bitter, a sound like chimes breaking. "We spent millennia enforcing a system whose full corruption we never understood. You still have a choice now. Do I? Do any of us?" Rinval gestured toward the station's central spire, where the council chambers pulsed with angry light. "The coalition you've created, the suppressed species, the reformers, the opportunists, they want blood. Specifically, they want the 8 founding species removed from power entirely. Trials. Reparations. Punishment for crimes committed before their ancestors existed. Is that unjust? It's politically impossible. Zelix, Orivex, Thexyler, they'll never submit to judgment from species they consider inferior. They'll fight. And this time, with your data scattered across the galaxy, there will be no secrets. The wars will consume everything." Kalen felt the weight of what they'd done settling on her shoulders. She'd known this was possible, probable even. But knowing it intellectually and watching it unfold were different experiences. "Then what's your solution?" "We let them keep ruling because change is too difficult." "I don't have a solution," Rinval admitted. "That's why I'm talking to you." Somehow, in one standard cycle, humanity went from irrelevant to indispensable. Species are looking to you now. The reformers, the revolutionaries, even some of the old guard, they want to know what humans want. "We want fairness." Fairness is a concept, not a policy. What does it mean in practice? Democratic councils? Economic redistribution? Military power sharing? Every species will have a different definition, and they'll go to war over the differences unless someone can thread the needle between justice and stability. Kalen stood, pacing along the pond's edge. Why are you really here, Rinval? The Tithian's light pulsed once, twice. Because in 3 cycles, the Council votes on Resolution 7754, a motion to invalidate the Treaty of Endless Concordance and establish a constitutional convention to rebuild galactic governance from first principles. If it passes, everything changes. If it fails, we slide into civil war. And the vote is going to be close. 23 species are firmly for it. 19 are firmly against. 47 are undecided, waiting to see which way the wind blows. The 8 founding species will vote as a block against it, obviously. They'd rather see the galaxy burn than lose control. Kalen understood. You want us to speak in favor of the resolution. I want you to speak, period. Humanity is the only species without a stake in the old system. You're too new to have been corrupted, too weak to threaten anyone militarily, and too audacious to ignore after what you just did. If Earth supports the convention, the undecided species will follow. If you oppose it, or worse, stay silent, everything you've revealed will just be ammunition for the next war. Marcus appeared from behind a flowering crystalline tree, tablet in hand. I've been monitoring the feeds. Rinval's right. There are already 3 proxy conflicts brewing in the outer rim. Species settling old scores while the Council is distracted. If this turns into open warfare, how long do we have? Kalen asked. 3 cycles until the vote, Rinval said. But species are already choosing sides. Every hour we waste is another hour closer to conflict. Kalen looked at Marcus, seeing her own doubt reflected in his eyes. They'd come here to fight for Earth's colonies, to secure humanity's place among the stars. Instead, they'd accidentally started a revolution. Now they had to finish it. The coalition. The Forgotten Hall was a relic from Veranther Station's earliest days, a chamber built when the Council had only 3 members, before the Treaty of Endless Concordance had calcified into eternal law. Now, 17 species crowded into a space meant for a fraction of that number, and Kalen stood at its center, feeling like a conductor before an orchestra that had never played together. Let me understand this correctly, said Ambassador Lyrics of the Kothian Collective, her feathered crest vibrating with agitation. You want us to support a constitutional convention that would completely restructure galactic governance, but you haven't actually told us what that governance would look like? Because it's not humanity's place to dictate that, Kalen replied. We're the newest species here. We've been in space for 97 years. Some of you have been navigating the stars for millennia. Why would we presume to design your future? Then what exactly are you proposing? Asked Mercuros, the Salvian representative whose liquid metal form rippled with impatience. Marcus activated a display. A framework, not a blueprint. We've analyzed historical governmental structures from across the galaxy, including those that existed before the Treaty of Endless Concordance. We've identified common elements that worked and failure points that didn't. The display showed interconnected nodes, each representing a different principle: proportional representation, rotating leadership, independent judiciary, economic transparency, military limitation, cultural autonomy. This looks like Federation Theory 101, Myra T said, though her bioluminescent patterns showed interest rather than dismissal. Nothing revolutionary here. Exactly, Kalen said. We're not trying to revolutionize. We're trying to normalize. The galactic sovereignty's problem isn't that it's too structured, it's that the structure serves 8 species instead of everyone. We're proposing a system where the structure serves the principles instead. Thexyler's voice cut through the discussion like a blade. Kalen hadn't seen the Sethian ambassador enter, but there she was, coiled in the chamber's entrance. Humans playing philosopher kings. How predictable. The room tensed. This was supposed to be a private coalition meeting. Having one of the founding 8 present changed everything. This is a closed session, Lyrics hissed. Nothing is closed anymore, Thexyler replied, slithering into the chamber. The humans made sure of that when they broadcast our secrets to every corner of the galaxy. So let's discuss this openly, shall we? You're all betting that Kalen Voss and Marcus Chen have your best interests at heart. That humans who couldn't even maintain peace on a single planet for most of their history, somehow have the wisdom to restructure galactic civilization. Better than the species who engineered a plague to maintain their monopoly, Myra T shot back. Thexyler's crest flared. That was a necessary action to prevent technological destabilization. You killed 4 billion Morvex. To save trillions from the chaos that would have followed. Thexyler's body expanded, filling the chamber with her presence. This is what you reformers don't understand. Governance isn't about fairness, it's about preventing the worst outcomes. Yes, the 8 founding species made brutal decisions. But those decisions kept the galaxy from tearing itself apart. No, Kalen said quietly. Those decisions kept 8 species in power. Everything else was justification. Thexyler turned her attention to Kalen, and the human fought the instinct to step back. You think you understand power because you've exposed ours. You don't. Power isn't about secrets, it's about the willingness to do what others won't. To make the hard choices. To sacrifice the few for the many. Like sacrificing 14 human colonies? Exactly like that. Your colonies were established in violation of established zones. Allowing them to stand would have created precedent. Other species would have followed. Resource conflicts would have erupted. So yes, we would have sacrificed your colonies, 14 worlds for galactic stability. That's the mathematics of power. Marcus leaned forward. And what's the mathematics of legitimacy? Because from where we're standing you can have all the power you want, but if no one believes you have the right to use it, you're just tyrants with good publicity. Legitimacy comes from results, Thexyler countered. 3,000 years of relative peace. That's our legitimacy. Built on mass murder and manipulation, Mercuros interjected. That's not peace, it's intimidation. Call it what you will. It worked. Kalen walked closer to Thexyler, close enough to see her reflection in the Sethian's crystalline eyes. Then why are you here? If your system works so well, why come to a meeting of reformers? Why not just dismiss us as irrelevant? For the first time, Thexyler hesitated. Her crest dimmed slightly. You're here because you're afraid, Kalen continued. Afraid that maybe your mathematics is wrong. Afraid that a system built on secrets can't survive transparency. Afraid that we're right. I'm here, Thexyler said slowly, because I've been doing this for 400 years and I'm tired. Tired of the weight of decisions that have no good options. Tired of being hated for choices that kept civilization functioning. Tired of watching species like yours arrive full of idealism, only to learn that governance crushes ideals into dust. The chamber fell silent. This wasn't the reaction anyone had expected. So help us, Kalen said. Help us build something better. Not perfect, better. A system that doesn't require genocide to function. That doesn't demand absolute power to maintain order. Help us prove there's another way. Thexyler's laugh was hollow. You're asking me to dismantle everything I've spent centuries building. No. We're asking you to help build something that lasts for reasons other than fear. The Sethian ambassador stared at Kalen for a long moment, then slowly coiled back toward the exit. You have 2 cycles until the vote. Make them count. She left, but something had shifted in the chamber. The coalition had just gained its most unlikely supporter. The speech. The council chamber had never held so many beings. Every seat was filled, and the observation galleries overflowed with representatives from species who'd never been invited to speak before. The holofeeds broadcast to 17,000 worlds, a galaxy watching to see if civilization would remake itself or tear itself apart. Kalen stood at the speaker's podium, feeling the weight of 7 trillion eyes upon her. Marcus sat in the human delegation section, giving her a subtle nod. In 3 minutes, the vote on Resolution 7754 would be called. But first, each side would make their final argument. Zelix spoke for the opposition. His crystalline form blazed with the confidence of 800 years of dominance. We stand at a precipice, the High Arbiter began. The humans have shown you our sins. Every mistake, every harsh decision, every compromise we made to maintain order. They've convinced you that these revelations prove the system must be destroyed. I'm here to tell you they prove the opposite. He gestured at the floating data displays. Yes, we sanctioned the Delthery. Yes, we prevented certain technologies from spreading. Yes, we made decisions that cost lives. Do you know why? Because we remembered. We remembered the Sethian VRYNN wars that cracked planets. We remembered the Carey economic collapse that starved billions. We remembered what this galaxy looked like before structure, before order, before the Treaty of Endless Concordance. Zelix's voice resonated through the chamber like a funeral bell. The humans speak of fairness, of representation, of transparency. Beautiful words. But governance isn't about beauty, it's about preventing horror. The 8 founding species didn't seize power. We accepted the burden of power because someone had to make the impossible choices. Someone had to maintain stability even when it required terrible acts. He pointed directly at Kalen. You want to tear down our system and replace it with, what? A constitutional convention? A democratic council? These humans can't even maintain unity on a single planet. Their history is an endless cycle of war, genocide, and collapse. And you want to trust them to redesign galactic civilization. The chamber erupted in mixed reactions, cheers from the traditionalists, boos from the reformers. Zelix waited for silence, then delivered his conclusion. Vote against this resolution. Maintain the structure. Yes, we will reform. Yes, we will include more voices. But we do it carefully, incrementally, with the wisdom of experience guiding us. The alternative is chaos, and chaos in a galaxy of 7 trillion souls means death on a scale that makes our worst decisions look merciful. He stepped down to thunderous applause from his supporters. Kaylin watched him go, her heart hammering. Everything they'd worked for came down to the next 3 minutes. She stepped to the podium. High Arbiter Zelix is right about one thing, she began, her voice steady despite her nerves. Governance is about preventing horror. Where we disagree is on what horror means. Kaylin looked across the sea of alien faces. He says the founding species accepted the burden of power. I say they seized it and called it sacrifice. He says they made impossible choices. I say they made convenient choices and called them necessary. He says they prevented chaos. I say they prevented anyone else from proving there was a better way. She activated her own display. Let's talk about horror. Not the theoretical horror of what might have happened without the Treaty of Endless Concordance. The actual horror of what happened because of it. Images filled the air. The Morvex plague. The Delthari famine. 100 smaller suppressions, each one justified as necessary for stability. 4 billion Morvex died because they developed shield technology. The Sethians engineered a disease to kill them. That's not preventing horror, that's committing it. 11 Delthari worlds starved because they created communication systems that competed with carry monopolies. That's not maintaining stability, that's protecting profit. 317 species have been systematically suppressed, not because they threaten peace, but because they threaten the supremacy of 8. Kaylin's voice grew stronger. High Arbiter Zelix asked what we're replacing his system with. Here's my answer. We're replacing certainty with possibility. We're replacing the arrogance of 8 species who think they alone can govern with the humility to admit that wisdom might come from anywhere. We're replacing a system built on fear with one built on trust. But what about chaos? Someone shouted from the galleries. What about it? Kaylin shot back. You think the last 3,000 years haven't been chaotic? You think the species who've been suppressed, manipulated, and murdered have experienced order? The Treaty of Endless Concordance didn't prevent chaos, it just concentrated it where the powerful wouldn't have to see it. She took a breath. Yes, humanity is young. Yes, our history is violent. Yes, we've failed more times than we've succeeded. But that's exactly why we understand something the founding species have forgotten. Failure is how you learn. Progress isn't about avoiding mistakes, it's about making new ones instead of repeating the old ones forever. Kaylin looked directly at Zelix. You had 3,000 years to prove your system worked. You maintained power, sure. But you didn't create peace, you created compliance. There's a difference. And now it's someone else's turn to try. She stepped back from the podium. Vote for Resolution 7754. Vote to build something better. Or vote to maintain the system that's already crumbling. Either way, the old order is over. The only question is whether we end it deliberately or let it collapse on top of us. The chamber exploded into noise. Delegates argued, cheered, shouted. And through it all, Kaylin returned to her seat, Marcus gripping her hand. They'd done everything they could. Now came the vote. The verdict. The vote took 6 hours. Not because the actual voting was complicated, each delegate simply registered their position electronically, but because what came after refused to follow any script. Resolution 7754 passed by a margin of 3 votes. The moment the results displayed, Zelix's crystalline form went supernova bright, his rage transforming him into a living star. This council does not recognize this vote. It was influenced by illegal data dissemination, foreign interference, and manipulation by species with no legitimate stake in galactic governance. The vote is valid, Rinval countered, his voice carrying surprising authority for someone who'd spent millennia in the founding species' shadow. Every delegate voted according to their conscience and their people's interests. The fact that you don't like the result doesn't invalidate the process. Process? Orvex slammed 4 fists against his console, cracking the metallic surface. There is no process without the Treaty of Endless Concordance. That treaty is the foundation of everything. You can't simply vote it away. We just did, Myra T said, her bioluminescence pulsing with triumph. And now we rebuild. But the founding 8 weren't conceding. Over the next hour, they employed every procedural trick accumulated over 3,000 years of dominance. Thexyler called for revotes, claiming technical irregularities. Axiomera challenged the quorum, arguing that species admitted to the council after cycle 2000 shouldn't have equal voting power. Synthex demanded emergency sessions to discuss the constitutional crisis the vote had created. Through it all, Kalen watched with growing concern. They'd won the vote, but winning and implementing were different things. The founding species still controlled most of the galaxy's infrastructure. The FTO relay networks, the trade routes, the resource distribution systems. They could theoretically comply with the vote while making the Constitutional Convention impossible to execute. Marcus leaned close. They're going to stall. Tie this up in procedures for years while the Reform Coalition fractures. He was right. Already, some of the species who'd voted for the resolution were wavering, worried about economic retaliation or military pressure. The unity Kalen had built was fragile, held together by shared frustration rather than common vision. Then Thexyler made her move. Since this council has apparently lost its legitimacy, the Sethian ambassador announced, the Sethian Concord will be withdrawing from Varanther Station and suspending all treaty obligations until a legitimate governing body is restored. We encourage other founding species to do the same. It was a brilliant tactical strike. If the founding 8 withdrew from the council, they'd create a power vacuum. Species would panic. Trade would collapse. And within weeks, everyone would be begging the founders to return and restore order, on their terms. Orivex immediately signaled agreement. So did Synthex and the Delthari representative who, despite their people's suffering under the old system, feared chaos more than oppression. The coalition was collapsing in real time. Kalen stood, her mind racing. They needed something dramatic, something that would prove the new system could work even without the founding species' cooperation. Ambassador Thexyler, she called out. Before you withdraw, I have a proposal. The Sethian paused mid-exit. Humans don't negotiate with those who've already lost. Not a negotiation. An offer. You said the founding species maintained order because someone had to make impossible choices. Prove it. Stay for 30 cycles. Help build the Constitutional Convention. Show us how governance actually works. If we fail, if the coalition can't create something functional in 30 cycles, you get to say, we told you so, to the entire galaxy. And if you succeed? Thexyler asked warily. Then you'll have helped create something better than what you had. Either way, you're part of shaping the future instead of being swept away by it. Zelix's light flared. This is a trap. They'll use our expertise to build their system, then discard us. Maybe, Kalen admitted. Or maybe we'll learn that governance isn't a zero-sum game. That there's space for experience and reform. For stability and change. For 8 species to participate without dominating. She looked at each of the founding 8 in turn. You spent 3,000 years telling yourselves you were indispensable. Here's your chance to prove it. Not through force or manipulation but through actual contribution. Stay. Help. Show the galaxy that you're more than just the people who seized power first. Rinval stood. The Tithian delegation supports this proposal. 30 cycles to draft a new constitutional framework, with participation from all council species, including the founders. Myra T joined him. The Delthari Union agrees. One by one the coalition members stood. Even some who'd voted against Resolution 7754 stood, recognizing that this compromise might be their only path away from civil war. Thexyler looked at her fellow founders. Something passed between them, a silent communication built on millennia of shared dominance. Then slowly she settled back into her coils. 30 cycles, she said. But understand this, we're not doing this because we believe in your vision. We're doing it because proving you wrong will be more satisfying than watching you destroy yourselves. Kalen smiled. I'll take it. The chamber exhaled collectively. They had their reprieve. 30 cycles to prove that a galaxy could govern itself without tyrants, benevolent or otherwise. 30 cycles to either birth a new era or confirm that the old one, for all its sins, was the best they could manage. As the session adjourned, Marcus caught Kalen's arm. You realize we just promised to redesign galactic civilization in a month? I know. That's impossible. Probably, Kalen agreed. But humans are good at impossible things. It's kind of our specialty. The Foundation. 29 cycles later, Kalen stood in the Constitutional Hall. a new chamber hastily constructed in Varanther Station's previously unused north wing. The space was deliberately different from the old council chamber. No hierarchical seating. No podiums of power. Just circular tables where delegates from 93 species worked in rotating committees. It had been chaos. Beautiful, frustrating, exhausting chaos. The Economic Framework Committee had nearly collapsed when the Kerry representatives tried to preserve their financial advantages under the guise of market stability. It took Mercuros threatening to publish their complete derivative portfolio to force actual compromise. The Military Oversight Committee had deadlocked for 2 weeks over whether species could maintain private defense forces. Resolution came when a Kothian delegate suggested that transparency might be more important than uniformity. Let species keep their militaries, but make their capabilities and deployments public record. The Cultural Autonomy Working Group had been surprisingly smooth until someone proposed a Galactic Heritage Council that looked suspiciously like the old system with a new name. Myra T had killed that in under 3 minutes of scorching rhetoric. And through it all, the founding 8 had participated. Not enthusiastically. Not without constant challenges and procedural objections. But they'd stayed, contributed, and occasionally even compromised. Now, on the 30th cycle, they gathered for the final session. We have a draft, Rinval announced, projecting the document into the chamber's center. The Constitutional Accord of Varanther Station. 17 articles covering governmental structure, economic policy, military limitations, cultural protections, and amendment procedures. He looked exhausted. They all did. 30 cycles of 18-hour sessions would do that. It's not perfect, Rinval continued. Every species here has objections to something. But that's the point. A constitution that makes everyone happy would probably be a dictatorship. This one makes everyone equally frustrated, which might be the best we can hope for. Axiomara's geometric form shifted skeptically. Let's discuss Article 4, the Council Composition Clause. It grants equal representation to species regardless of size, power, or contribution to galactic infrastructure. The VRYN constellation comprises 17 trillion beings. The Philarii number barely a billion. You're saying they have equal votes? Yes, Marcus said. Because we're representing species, not populations. If you want proportional representation, we can discuss a bicameral system. 1 chamber for species, 1 for population. But this was the compromise. It's absurd. It's no more absurd than giving 8 species total control, Lyrics countered. At least this way, absurdity is distributed equally. Thexyler, who'd been silent for most of the session, finally spoke. Article 11, the Founder Species Transition Protocol. You're requiring the 8 of us to divest 60% of our infrastructure control over the next 50 cycles. Relay networks, trade stations, resource processing facilities, all transferred to the Common Authority. That's correct, Kalen said. It will destabilize the entire economic system. It will decentralize it, Kalen corrected. There's a difference. And we're giving you 50 cycles to do it gradually. That's hardly revolutionary. Thexyler's crest flared. You're dismantling everything we built. No, Kalen said quietly. We're making what you built belong to everyone. That was supposed to be the point of the galactic sovereignty, wasn't it? A community of species working together? This just makes it true instead of propaganda. The chamber fell silent. Even Zelix, who'd fought every reform with calculated fury, seemed to recognize they'd reached the decision point. Orivex broke the silence. If we vote against this, if even one of the founding 8 rejects the accord, it fails. We return to the old system and your coalition fragments within a cycle. You know this. We do, Rinval acknowledged. And you know that if you vote against it, you confirm everything humanity accused you of. You prove you never cared about peace or stability, only power. Perhaps we're comfortable with that truth. Are you? Marcus challenged. Because I've watched you for 30 cycles. I've seen Axiomara work with the Solvian delegation on quantum communication protocols. I've seen Thexyler compromise on genetic engineering regulations. I've seen even Zelix admit when he was wrong about judicial independence. You've participated in building this. Voting against it now doesn't just reject the accord, it rejects your own work. Zelix's light pulsed slowly, thinking. You're asking us to surrender dominance voluntarily. No species in galactic history has done that. Then make history, Kalen said. Show the galaxy that power can be relinquished, that systems can evolve, that the founding 8 were capable of more than just maintaining control. The High Arbiter studied the document floating before him. 17 articles. 342 pages of dense political architecture. The product of 93 species arguing, compromising, and occasionally even agreeing. This will fail, Zelix said finally. Species are too different. Their interests too divergent. Within a century you'll face the same problems we did, and you'll wish you'd maintained the structure we built. Maybe, Kalen conceded. Or maybe we'll find solutions you never imagined because you never let anyone try. Either way, it's our turn to fail or succeed on our own terms. Zelix looked at his fellow founders. Something passed between them, resignation, perhaps, or the recognition that their era had ended regardless of how they voted. The Corvin Empire, Zelix said slowly, accepts the constitutional accord of Varanther Station. One by one the other 7 followed. When the vote concluded, the tally showed unanimous approval from all 93 participating species. The Treaty of Endless Concordance was officially dissolved. A new order had begun. Kalen exhaled, feeling the weight of 30 cycles, and perhaps 3,000 years, lift from her shoulders. They'd done it. Not perfectly. Not easily. But they'd done it. As the chamber erupted in celebration, Thexyler approached Kalen one final time. You were right, the Scythian said quietly. About failure being how you learn. I spent 400 years trying to prevent mistakes. Maybe that was the biggest mistake of all. So what will you do now? Thexyler's crest dimmed thoughtfully. Help make this work. Someone needs to ensure you don't repeat our errors. Might as well be someone who made them all firsthand. She extended a claw. Kalen gripped it, feeling the rough texture of scales against her palm. Welcome to democracy, Kalen said. It's messy. Good, Thexyler replied. Clean systems are usually dictatorships. As Kalen and Marcus left the Constitutional Hall, they paused to look at the nebula outside. Somewhere out there, 7 trillion beings were waking to a galaxy transformed, not by force but by 2 humans who'd refused to accept that things had to stay broken just because they'd always been that way. Think it'll last? Marcus asked. Kalen smiled. I think that's up to them now. We just gave them the chance. And that, she reflected, was more than humanity had ever asked for. A chance to be heard, to participate, to help build something better. The aliens had ruled the stars for 3,000 years. Now finally everyone else could too.